I am willing to donate my hamstrings to the NFL.
This is the worst.
Welcome into the worst fantasy show. I am your host with the least, Jack Lusney. We are flying solo tonight. We will be taking questions from the chat. If you guys have any start sit questions or any other trade questions or just whatever, just drop it in the chat. We will hit it in between each of the matchups. But we got a lot to get through with no bye week, so let's kick it off. Starting with the Thursday night matchup. So tonight, the New England Patriots taking on the New York Jets. The game is in New York or New Jersey, I guess. But the Jets are actually favored in this one. Over under for this game, 37.5 points. I do actually think it hits the over. I think I was surprised last week by Seahawks Patriots. I don't think it's going to hit the over by a lot. But I do think that this is kind of like a 23-20 type of game, a division game. I'm really not trying to play very many pieces, though. For me, this is I'm playing two running backs, Garrett Wilson, and everything else to me is desperation. And in deep leagues, is depending on your situation, I could see it. But for me, this is Breece Hall, Ramondre Stevenson, Garrett Wilson, not much else. And I don't even think it's going to be that great of a game for Garrett Wilson. I know DK Metcalf and JSN just went off against this team. It'll be interesting to see if Christian Gonzalez, the defensive back for New England, is able to bounce back a little bit in this game. And also Garrett Wilson really going to need to get a little bit more work and maybe see the end zone if he's going to, be relevant for fantasy and not just the wide receiver 32. But yeah, I don't even know if I'm going to stay up late enough to watch all of this game, let alone do I want pieces for fantasy football. So we can move right in to the Sunday games, starting with the New York Giants at the Cleveland Browns. Browns are favored here. Over under 38.5 points. This has to be the Amari Cooper game. If Amari Cooper can't get it done in this game, I'm completely out for the rest of the season. I know it has been abjectly terrible through the first 2 weeks. The man has 17 targets. Sometime that has to convert into, fantasy production. And I think this is the play here is against the Giants. Again, if it can't happen against the Giants, I think it's just not going to happen. Jerome Ford looked amazing last week, and they just faded him for no reason and gave Deonta Foreman 14 carries, and now I'm scared to death to start Jerome Ford in redraft leagues, but I think you still can plug him in as a flex play. I would prefer it as my RB3 or flex. Especially with all the injuries, you might just need him to cover. But I would also say temper expectations, even though the Giants are a plus matchup. We saw that with Brian Robinson. Like I said, Deonta Foreman makes no sense. The guy was cut, brought back to the practice squad, and all of a sudden is getting 14 carries in a game where Jerome Ford, again, was averaging like 5 yards carry. He had 7 carries for like 60 yards or something like that. He was doing well. And then I don't know if they were just trying to salt away the game or what it was, but definitely had me nervous. But I would basically start Amari Cooper, Jerome Ford. I'm not starting Deshaun Watson even in this matchup unless it's like a deep super flex league or I've got injured quarterbacks and really no other options. And then on the Giants side, I'm not I'm not trying to galaxy brain and fuck around with Daniel Jones and Wandale Robinson and I mean, the Browns are a good run defense, but with the state of injuries already, I would play Devin Singletary if I had to, and I would happily play Malik Neighbors. That's pretty much where I'm at. Is Neighbors is always going to be in my lineup, uh, just week in and week out, regardless of the matchup. I mean, the situation for Neighbors is already as bad as it could possibly be. Barring a matchup against like a true premier quarter like a L'Jarius Sneed. I know Denzel Ward plays for the Browns, but he doesn't really travel generally speaking. So I think this will be okay for Neighbors. But I'm not trying to fuck around too much in this game. Nor am I really trying to muck about in the next game. Chicago Bears at Indianapolis Colts. Colts are favored, but not by much. Over under for this game somehow is higher than Giants Browns, 42 and a half. Smash that under 42 and a half. I don't envision any scenario where the Bears are able to push that. So, again, this I'm outing myself here, but I've been actively trying to trade away my DJ Moore shares because I feel like the promise still exists of DJ Moore and the potential of Caleb Williams and Caleb getting better as the season goes on, DJ Moore having spike weeks, and that's all fine, well, and good. And I'm not just selling DJ Moore across the board, but all my teams where I started 0-2, all my teams where I'm off to a little bit of a slow start, you just have to make moves like that sooner rather than later because there's no point in me waiting for the Caleb Williams breakout week 8 if I'm going to be 2-6 by the time I get there. Because that basically means that I'm probably already heading out of my fantasy playoffs. So those are the kind of moves right away. Even guys like a lot of rookies, Brian Thomas Jr., Xavier Worthy, Lad McConkey, names with upside and promise. I would actively be trading them away for, again, it's hard. It depends on the league. It depends on the league, the roster construct, your team needs, and the scoring. But just to give kind of an example of what I've been doing, so in a lot of the leagues that I'm in, running backs, and I think we've seen this, and I just wrote an article about it as well. Running backs have just generally been easier to bank on this year more than ever. And so the guys like Najee Harris, Tony Pollard, James Conner, um, guys getting tons and tons and tons of carries. Like those are guys that I'm heavily targeting right now in trade talks. Kyron Williams, especially if I was able to pick up Blake Corum off of waiver. Like those are the types of running backs that I'm targeting right now in trade talks for some of these upstart wide receivers that are going to take some time, I think, to really catch on. All that to say, I think you're stuck playing DJ Moore. I don't like the matchup for DeAndre Swift. He looks abjectly terrible. And I was a DeAndre Swift truther when he went to Philadelphia, but that was because of how good Philadelphia's line was. And I thought DeAndre Swift was a talented running back in Detroit, but it was clear that he needed the help from the offensive line. I thought that was a good fit in Philadelphia. This is not a good fit. The Chicago Bears offensive line is one that has struggles. I don't believe in this offensive coordinator or this offensive system. I'm out on the Chicago Bears for the first half of the season as far as fantasy football. And on the other side of the ball, Anthony Richardson is completing like 9-10 passes a game, which is ruining Michael Pittman, who has always relied on heavy volume. Unless Joe Flacco starts some games here, Michael Pittman is another wide receiver that I would be honestly trying to trade away right now. While he still has I feel like Michael Pittman was always a boring name, and so he actually still feels like some people I think might view him as a buy low. I think he still has a lot of his value. He's definitely someone I would be trying to trade away also. and especially if you had a little bit of a slow start to the year. But in this game, I would start Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor, just because I do think the Colts will end up being like leading in this game. And it was weird how they just weren't using Jonathan Taylor in Green Bay, even though he was clearly, their best offensive weapon aside from Anthony Richardson's cannon arm and legs. I think they're going to go back to Jonathan Taylor a little bit more in this game, especially being at home. But yeah, definitely smash that under and frankly avoid for fantasy football. I have this as one of my avoids. Next, Houston Texans at Minnesota Vikings. This is an over under of 45.5. The Houston Texans are favored. Now, unfortunately, Nico Collins has popped up on the injury reports. So that's something you're going to have to monitor closely. If Nico were to sit, I would be fine playing Stephon Diggs, and I would be fine playing Tank Dell. Now, I know Minnesota has a good rush defense, but if Joe Mixon is just out and you were able to pick up Cam Akers for this one game and you are the CMC owner, you were just looking for that plug and play at running back, I would be fine with it. I think Cam Akers, not a great play. I think it's a middling, like if you are just desperately seeking 10 fantasy points in that RB2 spot or flex to cover, that's kind of where I view Cam Akers at. And if he's able to get another week or two, he might have a little bit of extended value. But for the most part, I'm just sticking to. I would still play CJ Stroud because he can just be otherworldly. But again, tempering expectations a little bit. I would play Stephon Diggs. A little bit of a revenge game here factor too. Minnesota, the team that originally let him go to Buffalo. And then Tank Dell again, closely monitor Nico Collins' situation. Dalton Schultz is irrelevant for fantasy football. There's better tight ends you can find even on waivers, even in this day and age of the tight end apocalypse. On the Minnesota Vikings side, Justin Jefferson has said he will play. Thank God that bullshit fucking play. It was a run play, by the way, where he got hurt. I saw the play. It pissed me off as a Justin Jefferson dynasty owner. It was like a toss play, weak side, and Jefferson, frankly, wasn't even involved. It was almost like he was doing like the perfunctory, like performatory blocking, where it's like I'm blocking you, but I'm just like not. I'm just doing this because technically it's part of the play, but I'm not actually like putting myself into this because I don't want to get hurt. And then it felt like the defender almost like took a cheap shot and like fell into his knee, maybe not fully on purpose, but like once he started falling was like, oh no, I'm falling into their star wide receiver's knee. Like yeah.
Go fuck yourself.
So yeah, but Justin Jefferson says he will play. I would play Sam Darnold. I would play Justin Jefferson. I would play Aaron Jones here. I think Jalen Naylor was a nice pickup, but unless I'm in a very, very deep league, I'm not playing him. For me, it's pretty much just those three. And then we can move into potentially the game of the week, the Philadelphia Eagles on the road against the New Orleans Saints. This is this line I think will probably change, but the Eagles were favored when I initially did the research for my show doc here. It may have already changed. I think the Saints should be clearly favored. Over under here 48.5. I actually think that potentially this hits the under because I think the Eagles are going to struggle a little bit. I think the New Orleans Saints defense is underrated. I think they can potentially contain Saquon Barkley. Not like they're going to shut him down or anything, but just contain him to kind of an average to above average game. And they're going to be able to lean on their offense. because the Eagles' defense, while their front seven is really good, I had concerns about their secondary going into the year, and that has proven out. And in fact, the front seven is struggling as well, and so the defense just doesn't look very good overall. And so with the Eagles, I mean, you're starting Jalen Hurts, you're starting Saquon, you're starting Devonta Smith, and in a pinch in this tight end landscape, even Mr. Mid himself, Dallas Goedert, worth a flyer if you just need 8 points in your tight end spot. On the Saints side, Taysom Hill seems to have avoided major injury for now, though he has been largely irrelevant for fantasy football, and I would not play him this week. So that means he's going to go for 30, 40 points because that's just how that is. But no, I do think this is a very clear delineation of Alvin Kamara is still very much a superstar running back that is in your lineup every single week, regardless of the matchup, because of his ability to perform not just in the rushing game, but in the receiving game. So Alvin Kamara 1, Chris Olave 2. And I'm not going to lie, I threw Derek Carr in my lineups, a couple of my DFS lineups, in leagues where I've had quarterback injuries or I was relying on maybe deeper plays like a Matt Stafford who's seen his entire team crumble by the wayside. I'm not going to lie, I would throw Derek Carr in ahead of a lot of options this week. Like, oh, God. Okay, let's go through it. Derek Carr or either Caleb Williams or Anthony Richardson in that matchup. Derek Carr. Derek Carr or Voldemort, a.k.a. Deshaun Watson. Derek Carr. Derek Carr, Daniel Jones, Derek Carr. So it's like, Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback, probably Justin Fields, I'm assuming still, or Derek Carr. Derek Carr. Honestly, Justin Herbert on the road with a team that's just been very insistent on running the ball. Or Derek Carr. Derek Carr. Are you going to start Andy Dalton in his first game? I'm doing it in some leagues because I have no choice. But, oh my God. Yeah, like Derek Carr is literally I think him and Baker Mayfield are the top 2 fantasy quarterbacks on the year right now through 2 weeks. Exactly how we all predicted it. Absolute slam dunk.
Do you want to see me dunk?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay. Are you guys ready?
Am I?
I'm okay. No, don't worry.
Does that always happen?
Yes, it does. So to wrap up, like I said, I would throw Derek Carr in as a flyer, which means he'll probably fall on his face this week finally. But no, I'm kidding. He'll be fine. Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave, end of list. And then we can move into the next game. Los Angeles Chargers at Pittsburgh Steelers. Just move the fuck on. Holy shit. These are 2 really good defenses. These are 2 teams that are going to run the ball. This game is going to last like 30 minutes. This is going to end in a score of 13-10. Greg Roman offense versus Arthur Smith offense. The over-under is set at 36. Steelers are favored because of the defense, I'm assuming. But even at an over-under of 36, I would hit the under. Quentin Johnson was a popular waiver pickup. Not playing him. Lad McConkey is my guy. Not playing him. Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins have both. Like, J.K. Dobbins has been a revelation in the first 2 weeks. Not playing him. Gus Edwards has been getting a lot of pop. Not playing him. This Steelers defense is for real, and we're at home. Fuck right off. I am not playing any Chargers. In fact, I would still play the Steelers defense here. And for the Steelers, I mean, you can take the shot on Justin Fields. I get it. He rushes so many times that he gets you the gross base volume. Najee Harris, I guess. George Pickens, you can always take that dart throw. I had him as a sit last week. He almost made me look really fucking stupid. But because he caught like a really huge ball that was called back on a penalty, and then he had another one. I think it was like a touchdown or something called back on another play. So he had 2 different plays called back that otherwise would have resulted in a monster day. But man, this is an ugly one. We don't have to spend much time here. It doesn't get much prettier though. Denver Broncos at Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa is clearly favored. The over/under is 39.5. I think Tampa is going to absolutely smash. I don't think Denver can even score fucking points right now, let alone compete in a game. It would be a miracle if they could just put 7 points on the board. I'm not playing any Denver Broncos for the foreseeable future. You couldn't fucking pay me to do it unless. The only way Denver Broncos are viable, shout out to Loser Ball. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this. It's a form of fantasy football where you essentially draft players to get the lowest possible score in your lineup, like golf. And whoever has the lowest score at the end of the week wins. Denver Broncos are fucking all-stars in Loser Ball leagues. But I'm not touching them in regular fantasy football. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, you start Mike Evans week in and week out. Some weeks he hits, some weeks he doesn't. That's Mike Evans' story. It has been for his entire career. He will get to 1,000 yards, so just play him. Rachaad White, banged up. Very interested to monitor his situation. If he is out, I am 100% starting Bucky Irving because of Bucky's involvement in the passing game, similarly to Rachaad White, but with a little bit more explosivity. I would love to get this matchup against Denver, who, yes, they've bowed up their defense this year, but we all remember what happened to them against the Miami Dolphins and how they got ran on, and they're always going to be susceptible to that while they're under this Sean Payton regime. But yeah, I'm actively starting Bucky Irving if Rachaad White misses. Now, if Rachaad White plays, I'm fading Rachaad White and I'm fading Bucky Irving. I wouldn't really mess with either of them because they're going to split. They're going to split the work, and if they're splitting the work and you're kind of slowing things down a little more with Rachaad White, Denver's defense is good enough to stop that. And if you're telling me Bucky's now only going to have maybe 6 to 8 to 10 plays, maybe he pops a long one, but it would have to be like a real long one for a touchdown. And again, with the new kickoff rules, we don't get as many of those opportunities, guys. Like, teams are starting at the 30-yard line because most of these teams are just doing the touchback kick. It starts at the 30, and that automatically reduces the amount of potential yards that you can get by 10 to 20 yards every single time that they are going out on a drive. So again, I would basically stick with Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin for sure. Godwin is a monster, especially in the slot. He should eat here. And then with the running back situation, I would love to get Bucky Irving in if Rachaad White misses. But if Rachaad White kind of forces himself to play even semi-available, I think I would just fade both. Finally, for these 1 o'clock games, the Green Bay Packers at the Tennessee Titans. The Titans are favored because Malik Willis is still the starting quarterback for this game, but he looks surprisingly good. More so running the ball than throwing. Even though he had the one passing touchdown, he was still under 125 passing yards, which was a prop bet that we had on Drafters that hit. But over under for this game, 36.5. I mean, for the Packers, we saw it's Josh Jacobs and nobody else. You can start Malik Willis in really weird super flex leagues because he'll get the running bonus, but otherwise, no, it's just Josh Jacobs. And then on the Titans side, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. It's weird. It's just Tony Pollard. You can take the pot shots on Calvin Ridley because Calvin Ridley will make some crazy acrobatic catches when Will Levis just chucks it down the field. But those aren't going to be very predictable. So if you have Calvin Ridley, like this week, I was actively trying to trade Calvin Ridley. In fact, I had a trade that went through and then got reversed. And it was this whole fucking kerfuffle in my league. I was told it wasn't fair, and it was just two jabronis for a fucking – Here was the trade. I'll let you, the crowd, to say. You guys can come at me in the comments if I'm wrong. I sent DJ Moore and Calvin Ridley. I get that I've been saying they are trade-away targets for me, but they are still two starting NFL wide receivers for young, potentially ascending quarterbacks. I traded DJ Moore and Calvin Ridley for Tyreek Hill. Yeah, of course. First of all, this is full redraft, 12-man league. Tyreek, obviously a premier wide receiver stud, but going to be without Tua Tagovailoa, who has found his way on the IR. We will experience some variation of Skylar Thompson or Tyler Huntley as his quarterback for the foreseeable future until Tua is able to come back. Assuming Tua is able to come back, because we all know his history with the concussions, and maybe it takes him longer to come back than we expect, right? So I'm taking that gamble that Tyreek, Saw's a quarterback, will still be able to do some Tyreek things. And the chat, first of all, lost their fucking minds. But then the guy was like, "Oh, my nephew was playing with my phone," or whatever it was, and it's like, look, totally totally possible, totally a thing, right? I don't want to. I'm not the type of commissioner where I'm like, uh, first of all, even if it had just been everybody freaking out, I would have almost wanted to reverse the trade just to kind of like prove everyone wrong, because I'm so competitive. Like, I'm still going to win in spite of this. But generally, the way that I run my leagues too is because I run a very Thanos style of commissionerhood, where it's like the trade goes through. I'm the one that looks at it. Was this collusion? Yes, no. Okay, trade through. Except when they're my trades, obviously, like, people tend to scrutinize a little more because they're like, all the commissioners that getting a crazy deal here. And it's like, okay, whatever. You guys have no idea. If Skylar Thompson looks like dog shit this week, the whole league's going to be like, that guy's going to feel like he missed out on a deal. Anyways, the trade ended up getting reversed. But it's this idea of like, oh, it's so unfair. It's like you have no idea what's going to happen. If Caleb Williams suddenly looks good in 2 weeks, and Will Levis figures out how to stop making complete boneheaded decisions, then I look like the fucking idiot in that trade. So, again, just a whole thing. But kind of getting off base here. Calvin Ridley and Tony Pollard start for the Titans. Josh Jacobs for the Packers. Let's move the fuck on. In fact, let's take a 30-second dance party before we go into the 4 o'clock games.
30-second dance party.
Alrighty. Carolina Panthers at Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders are favored the over-under 41.5. This was a dumpster fire of a game, and I was very much targeting the Las Vegas Raiders defense. But I'm not so sure now with Papa Dalton coming in, the Red Rifle, the prime meridian of NFL quarterbacks. Shout out to Dan Hansis and Mark Sessler and Heed the Call, formerly of Around the NFL podcast. Famously, Chris Wessling, rest in peace, tagged Andy Dalton as the prime meridian of NFL quarterbacks, where if you had a quarterback better than Andy Dalton, you had a franchise quarterback. And if you had a quarterback worse than Andy Dalton, you needed to replace that quarterback. But Andy Dalton, obviously, much longer in the tooth now. The rifle, a little bit rusted, but still shoots straight. I actually think that Andy Dalton is going to be very startable in this game. I think in the Dave Canales system, he's been there for years. Andy Dalton is a vet. He's probably picked up the system through the offseason and the preseason behind Bryce Young. I really think he's going to come in, and I think he's going to have a great game. And to the point that I went very heavy after Andy Dalton in a lot of my super flex leagues, including, for example, Scott Fishbowl. Even though I have Patrick Mahomes, I lost to Tua Viola, and Bryce Young was my quarterback 3 in that league. So obviously I was down to Patrick Mahomes only. So I went hard in the paint after Andy Dalton, and I think he's startable here. It's funny that everyone's talking about how this revives the fantasy relevance of Deontay Johnson, and I do agree that that is true. But I actually think this is going to be even better for Adam Thielen. I'm watching Adam Thielen run open routes, and Bryce Young can't seem to save his life. Andy Dalton, especially if you look back, I think there was a very brief window and moment in time where Andy Dalton and Adam Thielen played together, and Andy Dalton just peppered this man with targets. So I believe in it so much that I've been sneaking Adam Thielen into some of my DFS lineups because I know nobody is going to be doing that shit. Nobody's going to be drafting Andy Dalton, Adam Thielen in any of their best ball weekly lineups. And I'm hoping that that ends up being a differentiator for me. So, hey, if you're out there listening, but also maybe you can take advantage because I'm telling you, if there's ever a week Adam Thielen's going to come out for and have like, especially again, we just saw the Raiders getting that kind of shootout matchup last week. Like I could see them getting in kind of the same thing. Minshew versus Dalton. 2 guys just throwing the ball 40 times each. Just pow, 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 pow. Like again, Adam Thielen, I could see him coming out of this game with 8 for 125 and a tutty. Like it's just, it's so Panthers. It's so Adam Thielen, so Andy Dalton. But those honestly, like in absolute fucking desperation, I would play Andy Dalton again. I'm talking about a super flex league that has really like biased quarterback scoring. Because like even though it's deflated pass yards, you get I think they get first down bonuses and that kind of shit. Again, like deep super flex leagues where I'm dealing with injuries, multiple injuries. Like I'm talking like, look, I got a league. It is Scott Fishbowl actually. It's not just that I'm missing Tua. It's like I'm missing Tua and I'm missing AJ Brown and I'm missing Isaiah Pacheco. If you have leagues like that, super flex leagues especially, I can see and understand why Dalton and Thielen might crack your lineup. Thielen especially. Thielen, if he was dropped in any leagues, I would actively be trying to pick him up. He's going to be really good for the next 4 weeks, and then really try to trade him away for something if you can. On the Raiders side, I mean, Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers are excellent plays. I think you can stream Gardner Minshew here. I think Andy Dalton will do enough to actually keep them passing in the game, like I said. Zamir White has just been terrible through the first 2 weeks of the season. Maybe he can have a bounce back here. But again, the whole thing of the last 2 weeks of teams didn't need to pass to beat the Panthers was because it was Bryce Young at the quarterback's position. If Andy Dalton changes that, we might just see more of the same of what we saw last week, where Minshew's just throwing it all over the yard to Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers. So I think I would just stick with those 3 guys, and that's it for me. All right, Miami Dolphins at Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks are favored here 5.5. 41.5 point over under. Seahawks are favored obviously because of the Tua Tagovailoa injury. You have Chip Skyler is what I've been calling him. I needed to have a fucking drop. He's peanut butter. They're motherfucking peanut butter and jealous. We'll get that drop for next week. Chip Skyler, especially if he's good. If he's good, oh my God, Chip Skyler is going to be the thing for the year. But yeah, Chip Skyler Thompson, a.k.a. Skyler Thompson, going to be starting quarterback for the Miami Dolphins. So Tyreek Hill has been slipping in a lot of the daily lineup stuff, which I totally understand, but he is still Tyreek Hill. I'm still going to play. I'm going to play Hill and A-Shane. That's it. On the Seattle Seahawks side, I think you can play Geno Smith. I think you can play DK Metcalf. Obviously, you just play him every week. last week I had him as a bit of a fade, and that was obviously a mistake. I still had him as a start because you start your studs. But that was one where I was like temper expectations, and then they had a busted coverage, and he went and caught a 50-yard touchdown, and then also just had a bunch of volume. So DK Metcalf is just always in your lineup. JSN, the breakout is officially on, 16 targets. We'll see if that's repeatable for this week. I think that'll be interesting to see, especially if Tyler Lockett can kind of take that role back a little bit. But I think I would just play DK Metcalf, JSN, Geno Smith in Superflex leagues. And I mean, I would play Geno Smith even above, again, a lot of kind of single quarterback options that suck. Like, we were talking about Justin Herbert and Caleb Williams and Deshaun Watson. Like, I would play him above that level of quarterback, but that's pretty much it. Oh, and if Kenneth Walker were to miss again, which I do think he will, Zach Charbonnet, definitely a playable asset. We got a question in the chat. Untamed Music. Thank you for stopping by. Last week I flexed Brian Thomas Jr. over Mandrews. I was right about that one in half PPR. Do I continue with the rookie or Mark this week? The reason Mark is a flex option is because I have Laporta Potty. So I do. Oh man, I love Brian Thomas Jr. I've been on the Brian Thomas Jr. train since before he was drafted. I had him ranked third, even ahead of Roma Dunes, infamously, in my rookie rankings pre-draft. So I am a huge Brian Thomas Jr. stan. I have to say, I was listening earlier to the Fantasy Footballers, obviously one of the biggest fantasy football podcasts that exists. They literally have Mark Andrews as a start of the week in that Dallas matchup. I get it. Ooh, I think I would still play Brian Thomas Jr. I think it's going to be a really tough matchup. First of all, it's going to be on the Monday night doubleheader. We haven't gotten that far yet, but it's going to be at the Buffalo Bills. So on the road against the Bills, tough defense. But if I'm just looking at, and it's only half PPR is the thing you said too. If it was full PPR, that's where I would lean more of the Mark Andrews side. You said it like you were right last week because it was two plays. Literally, Brian Thomas Jr. had 2 catches last week for 96 yards. So it's like when there are deep breaks in the coverage, it's because Brian Thomas Jr. is causing them in a sense of he's just so fucking big and fast that he's getting open wide downfield. So if you're asking what is the ceiling play, I still think it is Brian Thomas Jr., but I think Mark Andrews has a very good matchup this week. I think this is the week that he gets it going a little bit. I mean, he was more involved last week than the week before. So if that holds, man, I think I would. Here's the one caveat is if the rest of my team is just like super solid, like I don't have injuries, I've got let's just say I got my lineup stacked with running, like I'm feeling real good. And Laporta's got a good matchup this week, even though he hasn't really performed through the first 2 weeks. None of the tight ends have really. Yeah. In most situations, I want Brian Thomas Jr. in my lineup. In very select situations, if I'm taking what I consider the safe kind of floor option, I do think Mark Andrews in a plus matchup is viable this week in the flex. But my gut and my heart still says I like Brian Thomas Jr. there. Mr. Green 0915, thank you for stopping by. DJ Moore or Drake London full PPR. This for me is a little bit easier. I'm still going to go with DJ Moore. This is because DJ Moore in full PPR, I think his floor is safer than Drake London, even with Caleb Williams. So Keenan Allen dealing with the heel injury, I don't think he's going to play. I think he's going to be out again. And we saw, even though it wasn't great, it was 10 targets for DJ Moore, caught 5 passes for I think it was 5 for 50 or something like that. So it was 10-ish points in full PPR. Drake London, if not for that crazy touchdown that he caught at the very end, he again has a disappointing fantasy day. And the Kansas City Chiefs, we're going to get into it a little bit later in the Sunday night matchup, but they are a tough defense. And the kid, I forget his name right now, but the kid who replaced L'Jarius Sneed for defensive back for Kansas City, again, apologies, I'm forgetting his name right now, but he's a really good player as well. So I would be hesitant to start Drake London. I would feel more comfortable, I think, with DJ Moore there. I'm just trying to see if I can find that kid. Trent McDuffie. There it is. Trent McDuffie. He's a solid cornerback. So it scares me a little bit. And just, again, solid defense overall. Yeah, Drake London, really. I have so little shares of Drake London. It's because just so many things needed to come together for him to finally ascend. And, I know it's all he needs is a good quarterback. It's one coming off an Achilles tear, though. So yeah, we'll get back into the matchups, but I super appreciate you guys' questions. If you have any more questions out there, chat, just drop them in. We'll hit them in between the matchups, like I said. But we were at Detroit Lions at Arizona Cardinals. The Detroit Lions, our favorite here. The over-under is 51.5. Big old points. I actually think this is going to hit the under. Shout out to my guys, Sleazeball and Disco. Was on their show last week. And we were talking about the Detroit matchup last week that I thought was a plus matchup. And they were the ones that ended up saying, no, we think this hits the under. Decent defenses. I think the Cardinals' defense can be had, but I think Detroit's defense is better than people think. Oh, maybe I'm wrong. On the road, though, I think this is, though, you start everybody in this. This is, on the Arizona Cardinals side, you're starting Kyler Murray, you're starting Trey McBride, you're starting Marvin Harrison Jr., you're starting James Conner. And on the Detroit side, you're starting Jared Goff, you're starting David Montgomery, you're starting Jahmyr Gibbs, you're starting Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had a full practice Wednesday, so he should be available. And you're starting Sam Laporta. I think the question here is, do you still start Jameson Williams? I think the answer is yes. Now, you might be disappointed either in Jameson Williams or in Sam Laporta because it seems like they're the ones kind of eating into each other's target shares. But potentially they could just both eat in this game, and maybe it's one of the running backs that we kind of see fade a little bit in this game. So either way, though, the matchup's so good that you're just trying to grab pieces of this fantasy game because it should be a pretty explosive one for fantasy. We got another question from Mr. Green before we get our next matchup. I have Derrick Henry and Ramondre Stevenson. Would you try to trade one of them to upgrade or ride it out? I would ride it out. With the state of running backs this year, I'm holding on to my volume running backs. Derrick Henry is just pure touchdown upside every game that he plays. Ramondre Stevenson is getting all the work for New England. So, yeah, I would just be holding those guys clutched tightly to my chest. So, yeah, don't let them go. Speaking of Derrick Henry, the Baltimore Ravens at the Dallas Cowboys. Baltimore is slightly favored here. I think the Cowboys will win this game, though. Cowboys coming off a whipping against the New Orleans Saints. I feel like traditionally the Cowboys bounce back well from getting their asses kicked, though. And especially when it's a home game that they get to follow up with. So I think this will be a Dallas win. Over-under here is 48.5. I think this could potentially hit the over, though. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. So I am trying to start. Obviously, Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb are in your lineup. I'm not super trying to get Zeke in my lineup, though. I think I'm really actively trying to start Brandon Cooks. And then if Jake Ferguson misses in really deep tight end premium leagues, I might fuck around with Luke Schoonmaker, who I wasn't that big on, but he went 6 for 6 last week. So 6 receptions from a tight end. That's almost like guaranteed 10 points. So he's viable. But really, for me, this is Dak, CD, and Brandon Cooks. And then on the Baltimore side, it's Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, and Derrick Henry. Take your pick. All right. San Francisco 49ers at Los Angeles Rams. 49ers are favored by a shit ton. Over-unders 45.5. I think this could hit the under because I don't know how the Rams are going to score points on this 49ers defense. The Niners are struggling too. Monitor George Kittle, who's suddenly on injury report with a fucking hamstring. Deebo Samuel already set to miss week. Christian McCaffrey on IR. This team is hurting. If Kittle were to miss, Brandon Ayuk suddenly becomes the only guy left. So I think Brandon Ayuk would be a playable option, even though, again, because he missed training camp, supposedly, even though he was kind of there skulking around in a hoodie. He's not fully in game shape, but he did drop a touchdown pass. So I think, again, if he's the only one on the field, he's going to be viable. Jordan Mason is an obvious smash play here because the Rams, you talk about the 49ers are beat up. The Rams, Jesus fuck. Cooper Kupp, done. Might come back earlier than we expect, but not this week. Puka Nacua on IR. Fucking 4/5 of the offensive line is in tatters. Like, the defense has a bunch of injuries. Like, they are an absolute. They're that scene in Space Jam when everyone is just dead. Oh, it's half my fantasy teams too. Jesus Christ, it feels like. But yeah, so on the Rams side, I would start Kyron Williams, and I would. That's it. I'm not even feeling super great about that. But Kyron feels like the only game in town, the only part of the offense left that is going to be viable, and McVay should be able to scheme up something. Though I don't want to play him in this game, I would still hold Colby Parkinson. I'm just kind of holding Colby Parkinson, especially if he has a better game than expected here, because he didn't really do much last week. If he has a better game than expected here, that would give me enough confidence, I think, to go back to that well next week, meaning putting him in my starting lineup. If I just see no involvement again in a game like this where now you don't even have Cooper Kupp, I'll probably just cut bait with that. Kansas City Chiefs at Atlanta Falcons. This is the Sunday night game. The Falcons just haven't looked good, and they got a real cheap win against the Eagles, and I get it, but that all came like on the last drive. I don't think Kirk Cousins is right yet. I think it's going to take some time, and I don't think it's going to be against this Kansas City Chiefs defense that he's going to find it. So I would start Bijan Robinson. Kyle Pitts, because of, again, the landscape of tight ends, I would start him. I would bench Drake London only if I had a truly good option to replace him with. So kind of, when we were looking at Mr. Green's question here, he said DJ Moore or Drake London. DJ Moore to me is a very competent wide receiver. Like, I would take the chance on DJ Moore in that situation and his talent. A Calvin Ridley to me is someone that I would play above Drake London. Guys like Chris Godwin and Zay Flowers, like really solid wide receiver options that you might have got a little bit later than Drake London, I think I would play ahead of him. But I'm not trying to throw it's not like I'm so down on him that I would put like Tyler Lockett in. I'm ahead of him. Adam Thielen? I bet Adam, that's a crazy bet. I bet you Adam Thielen outscores Drake London this week. All right. But yeah, start Bijan, start Kyle Pitts, and then on Kansas City, I mean, the running backs are dead. I'm not fucking with any of them. Pick them up on waivers, fine. Start them in my lineup this first week before I see it? No. So for me, this is Mahomes, this is Kelsey, this is Worthy. Excuse me. This is Worthy and Rice, and that's it. All right, the Monday night doubleheader, just two gross games. We'll just smash through this so that we can get to the streamers and get on out of here. I do see the question. We'll get to you right after these Monday matchups. So just quickly, Jacksonville Jaguars at Buffalo Bills. Bills are favored over under 45.5. I would obviously start James Cook. I would still start Travis Etienne. Brian Thomas Jr., bit of a deeper play. If I have to, I don't mind it. Dalton Kincaid, tight ends suck, but you still are probably eating that start. Josh Allen is just always in your lineup, and Trevor Lawrence, I would bench. For Derek Carr, or Baker Mayfield at that level of quarterback. But I would still play him above like complete jabronis. It's tough, though. It is looking rough for those Jacksonville Jaguars. And then finally here, let's just wrap it up so we can get to the last couple questions and some streamers. Washington Commanders at Cincinnati Bengals. Bengals are favored. Over-under 47.5. I actually really like Jaden Daniels. He just runs the ball a shit ton. I would start him over Trevor Lawrence. I would start him over Deshaun Watson, a lot of the other basic quarterbacks, that kind of prime meridian of gross quarterback that we talked about earlier. I am not fucking starting Terry McLaurin anymore. I tried, guys. I really wanted it to work. It's not. I don't think it's going to work. Jaden Daniels still has to fix some things as far as being a passer in the NFL before we can rely on Scary Terry. So unfortunately, I think that might be cooked. I love the running back, Brian Robinson. I would play him here. The Bengals really struggle against the run, so I'm totally fine playing him. Really deep ancillary play, Austin Eckler, but he's definitely been the secondary running back there. So yeah, I think for me, this is Jaden Daniels and Brian Robinson. And on the Bengals side, I mean, again, if Jamar Chase can't get it done here, what the fuck are we doing? Like, this is the Joe Burrow Jamar Chase game. It has to be. It just has to be. Mike Gesicki in deeper leagues as a tight end. He was getting a lot of volume. I might mess around with that, but I don't really like the running backs for the Bengals, even in a plus matchup here. It feels like I might go with Zach Moss, but I don't believe in either Zach Moss or Chase Brown, to be honest, especially when they have to share the workload. Like, if it was one or the other, fine, just by pure volume. But for me, honestly, this is Burrow, Chase, maybe Gesicki, but I'm really trying to limit myself to Burrow and Chase here. Really deep leagues again, like a guy like a Yoshavas, like you're just hoping he catches the touchdown. I get it, but yeah, it's not great. Also, NFL, please stop with these fucking Monday night double headers. Like, who the fuck is out here wanting to watch Jacksonville Jaguars and Buffalo Bills at the same time as Washington Commanders and Cincinnati Bengals? It's bad enough that you give us a double header, but you give us two wonk-ass games on top of it? Fuck off. All right, the Joker. Hey, shout out to you, my man. This channel started once upon a time as the Fantasy Joker, just so you know. But hey, appreciate you. Jets defense or Bears defense. Also, Brock Purdy or Baker Mayfield, full PPR. Well, I don't think the PPR matters in this situation because I don't think Brock Purdy or Baker Mayfield will be catching passes, though that would be fucking hilarious if they were just out there on Philly specials multiple times a game. But for me, this is very obviously Baker Mayfield. I get that Purdy might potentially have a little bit of a better matchup against the Rams, but he's also, like, Purdy is also going to be down all of his primary options. Like, if there's no George Kittle and there's no Deebo Samuel and there's no Christian McCaffrey, do you really think Brock Purdy is going to outscore Baker Mayfield, who still has Mike Evans and Chris Godwin? Like, I'm going with Baker Mayfield here. And then for the defense, Jets defense or Bears defense. It's a tough one. If you can get the Buccaneers defense, I would do that instead because they're playing the Broncos and they're floating on a lot of waivers. A lot of smart people pick them up, but if they're still out there, Bucks over both of your options that you said. If you're really forcing me to choose between the Jets and the Bears, I'm going to go with the Bears, only because I think Anthony Richardson is more prone to turning the ball over, and that usually equates to more points for fantasy and more opportunity for big games. And the Bears defense is decent. So it's not like you're just taking a bad defense. I think both matchups aren't the greatest, like the Jets, against the Patriots. Yeah, they're at home, and the Patriots aren't the best, but they're just going to run the shit out of the ball. And Jacoby Brissett doesn't really turn the ball over a ton. I don't know. I maybe I'm wrong. The only thing is if you really are just wanting to invest into tonight's game and you got nothing else going and you want to just throw Jets defense in there so you have some action on Thursday night, I totally understand that part of it. If you're asking me which one I just think is the better play, technically I think it's the Bears. All right, Z Smitty. Hey, what's up? Thank you so much for the question. Should I start Jordan Love? No. Yeah, I think he's dead. Aaron, he's not dead, but I don't think he's going to be back this week. It should be Malik Willis. And it's a road game against the Titans. I wouldn't want Love in his first game back anyways on a road game. Aaron Rodgers. So we'll pick between Aaron Rodgers, Jared Goff, Derek Carr, or Geno. Fuck. Derek Carr is the number one quarterback in all fantasy football right now, my man. But with that said, I know it's been really rough for Jared Goff through the first part of the year. For these first 2 weeks. I think in a matchup at Arizona where he's gonna have to throw the ball to keep up with the scoring, I think this could be a good matchup for Jared Goff. So I'm gonna prioritize it Goff and then Derek Carr and then Geno is how I'm looking at it. And I'm not fucking around with Rodgers on a Thursday night against the Patriots when I ayahuasca man. I need to see a lot more from him before I start sliding him in my lineup above some of these other guys that have been performing. All right. Thank you guys so much for the questions. Again, if you guys have any more questions, drop them in the chat because we're going to be leaving soon. But before we do, we will hit you with some streamers.
Don't tell me. We're about to go over a huge waterfall.
Yep.
Sharp rocks at the bottom?
Most likely.
Bring it on.
So it's such an important week for fantasy football because of all the injuries. I have expanded the streamers list for the first time. So some of these are going to be off the top of my head, and a lot of them are going to be what I'm doing and pivoting to in my own leagues. But starting with the quarterbacks, we already talked about Derek Carr is basically the number one fantasy quarterback right now, still widely available, especially in single quarterback leagues. In super flex leagues, my guy is Andy Dalton. I'm going with Andy Dalton, the Red Rifle. This may not be the best matchup this week, but I do think that it will get better, and I think he's going to have a lock on that job for the foreseeable future, at least the next 4 to 6 weeks, which for fantasy football is an eternity. As far as the running backs, we kind of poked around a little bit earlier, but Bucky Irving, if he's still floating out on waivers, is a must add, especially if Rashad White is going to miss this game. In a desperation pinch, I don't hate the Cam Akers play. I know other analysts are against it. I am fine with it. I think Houston is the type of team that wants the running back to have 15 to 20 carries a game, regardless of who it is. I don't think Dameon Pierce is going to be fully ready for this game either. So I would be totally fine starting Cam Akers in a one-game pinch. For wide receivers, I think the Rams, all of the Rams wide receivers are going to be decent flex options. It's going to be hard to know which one to hit. But between, I think the way I would rank them actually for fantasy is Tutu Atwell, Demarcus Robinson, Tyler Johnson, and Jordan Whittington. I think Tutu and Demarcus Robinson. The reason I have them a little higher is because I think they just give you a little bit more explosivity. Like if I want to bet on one of these guys, it's which guy's just going to catch a 50-yard pass and then maybe a couple other passes, maybe a touchdown, maybe get cheap his way to 3-4 receptions for 100 yards and a tutty. Who do I see having that path easier is Demarcus Robinson and Tutu Atwell. I view Tyler Johnson as like a Robert Woods clone. That he's literally filling that role for this team. So it's much more of like a PPR play. So if you are in full PPR, maybe you want to prioritize Johnson, but for the most part, I would go with Atwell or Demarcus Robinson. I think they're good streaming options. And then for tight end, again, I'm sticking with Colby Parkinson, not in my lineup, but just in theory of I want to hold on to him. But I think the most obvious play is, and this is the one I would make tonight, if Hunter Henry is somehow still floating out on your waivers, he had like 8 receptions for 100 yards last week. He was a popular ad in a lot of leagues. He also just kind of went left on the bench in a lot of leagues. And again, Jets defense, I think, is going to be tough in trying to get after the quarterback. If I think about Jacoby Brissett trying to get the ball out of his hands quickly, I would assume that a lot of those targets are going to go to Hunter Henry. So I think that's a viable play for tonight. And then normally this segment is for streaming defense and streaming kicker. So we've got a couple more of those for you guys. Streaming defense, Tampa Bay, number 1, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Go check right now if they are out there on your waivers. Add them. Draw. I don't give a shit what defense you have. Drop the. There is no defense anymore worth holding, by the way. That's another thing. Maybe we got to do an article or something there. Remember when there used to be like 5 to maybe 7 defenses in fantasy football that were worth holding year round, and you just played them every week? That doesn't exist anymore. That shit is for the birds. If you're doing that, you're losing out on critical points every week. But yeah, Tampa Bay Buccaneers against the Denver Broncos. The Broncos couldn't even fucking score a field goal last week, let alone a touchdown. Bo Nix looks absolutely hopeless right now. This whole team looks abjectly terrible, and the Buccaneers defense is actually pretty good. So I would love to play Buccaneers defense. They might not be available. I actually kind of pushed the Packers against the Titans up my list. Again, as long as Will Levis keeps making bonehead decisions and throwing, huge interceptions and, again, potential pick sixes. Like week 1, we went with Chicago. Week 2, we went with whoever the fuck he played. I think it was the Jets. So week 3, we are going with the Packers, and then the Chargers at the Steelers, or the Steelers at the Chargers. Both are viable, but Chargers might be more widely available. And the Raiders at the Panthers. I did have them on the list, but I'm not going to lie, Andy Dalton's making me nervous. And then finally, we'll wrap it up with streaming kickers. Dustin Hopkins for the Cleveland Browns is going to be facing the New York Giants. Matt Prater for the Arizona Cardinals will be facing the Detroit Lions. And Blake Grupe for New Orleans, he will be facing the Philadelphia Eagles. So all 3 of those kickers have good matchups. And then also, just by the way, Chase McLaughlin and Cairo Santos. Blake Grupe, Chase McLaughlin, Cairo Santos. They are ranked 5, 6, and 7 in fantasy points. So if you guys have a kicker out there that's not performing up to snuff, drop them for one of those 3 guys. All right. We are clear of the matchups. We're clear of the streams, and we're clear of the questions. So we will clear the fuck out so that we can go and enjoy some Thursday night football. And I use that word enjoy loosely, but I did enjoy being here on stream with you guys. I will not use that loosely. But man, I appreciate you guys out here for watching. Thank you guys so much for dropping in and dropping questions. We will be back Sunday morning live, 9 a.m. Early bird doth catch the worm. We'll be answering all of your final start sit questions and taking questions from the Peanut Gallery, my friends over at fantasysportsadvice.network. But until the next time, I will catch all of you guys on the flip side.
He's running down the middle by the 50. He's at the 30. He's bare-chested and banging his chest. Now he runs the opposite way. He runs at the 50. He runs at the 40. The guy is drunk, but there he goes. The 20. They're chasing him. They're not going to get him. Waving his arms, bare-chested. Somebody stop that man. Here comes